Hi everyone, this is Karak from ACG, and today I'm bringing you the review for Homeworld, Deserts of Kharak, an RTS game of my love life where you control armies of me going out and trying to fool women into thinking I'm an okay guy. Nah, this is the return of the beloved and, of course, bedeviled Homeworld franchise, a franchise that started with Homeworld 1 and 2, space-bound RTS games that are labeled classics by most, and then went into the hell of IP arguments and start and stop design. Then, randomly and with very little fanfare, we suddenly get informed that Deserts of Kharak was on its way to PC, which is the switch from space to desert, sort of like if Forza went from cars to friggin' pedal bikes. Remember, this game was actually hardware shipbreakers prior to that, a completely unconnected game to Homeworld until it switched at some point during its development. So let's see if Deserts of Kharak is nothing more than a hodgepodge title, utilizing a name to push another game, or if it's something special, a lovable mutt, and the result of odd breeding. If you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's the review for Homeworld Deserts of Kharak. No more space, fantastic futuristic Mad Max, and possibly the most badass turrets ever to be put in a video game. Graphics are up first. You know, no one's going to call this ugly, at least not when it's standing still. Replacing the depths of space and the futuristic stylings of Homeworld's original titles, Deserts of Kharak harkens back about 100 or so years to a time when the races on the planet found the Gerisi object, which is how they get into space for the Homeworld titles, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Now, this moving back in time does allow for the oddly current day technologies to exist, and other than levitating bad guys, the units within the game feel far more current than they do far future, with dune buggies and tanks alongside the strangely aircraft carrier looking main base, Capisi. Now, whether zoomed in or zoomed out, the physics and look of the world are excellent, with wind whipping gritty sand into sight-choking clouds almost instantly. The first time your group of buggies jets over a hill, flying into the air as it absolutely just rips towards the enemies, you're going to have a huge smile on your face. That doesn't mean everything is great in the desert, though. Once zoomed in, there is a large give and take of detail on some units, and there can be an annoying level of detail pop-in regardless if you mess around with the settings on the PC. Also, the game is in sore need of optimization. If I ran this bad, well, it wouldn't be called running. See, I run a 980 GTX paired to an i7 5820. It's overclocked to 4.2, and this thing friggin' choked when trying to run at my default 1440p resolution. Even dropping it down to 1920p, it barely stayed at 60 frames per second, and it absolutely should have. Now, when trying to run it at 1440p, I got all of 13 frames per second during heavy battle scenes, and of course you're going to want good frames during those scenes. During normal gameplay, I was getting 30 to 50 frames per second, and that's with some light action occurring. Now, nothing about Homeworld, sadly, shows any need that requires this kind of firepower, and it's absolutely disappointing. I decided to test out on my other system that has a 680 GTX and an older 970, also at 4.2, and of course saw it absolutely tank the frame rate there as well. Playable, but not at all what I would have liked, and certainly needs some optimization. Also, there was a shadowing glitch that resulted in odd shadowing problems at various times as well. Despite switching to older drivers, it always seemed to show up. Ultimately, the game looks pretty on its highest settings, but nothing being displayed would ever indicate the massive gulf between power and performance that you're going to see here. It looks good, but its performance is drastically disappointing. Sound, music, and voice.
Go for support. Ready.
All control systems successfully installed and online.
Systems confirmed. Rachel, redeploy to your base runner.
Copy that.
Attention all stations. This is Fleet Intelligence for the expedition carrier Capisi. I will be issuing all mission objectives through this channel.
And sound is up first. It's excellent. Whether you're dropping heavy ordnance onto the heads of dug-in tanks or you're firing off rail rounds at the broadside of a land carrier, the sound is excellent. Super impactful. Even when battle's absolutely out of control with hundreds of explosions ringing around you, it's informational and does a really good job informing you of what's occurring on screen, especially if it's running at friggin' 13 frames per second. Music. You know, during much of the game, it's going to sound like someone stuck down a couple keys on the keyboard and high-fived somebody else and they just walked away. It's going to sit there and throb, and that results in an unremarkable and really uninteresting audio representation for much of the title. Now, here's the problem. When battle begins, or when levels load up, you have the expected natural instruments that you would assume would come with desert-like scenes. There's a great deal of subdued percussion as well that does a really good job of lifting that audio up a bit. I actually think the soundtrack itself is strangely good. It's just it rarely ever plays. The other time, it's this, I don't even want to call it music. It's just this ambient throb. And really, to be honest, it was very, very boring to my ear. Voice. Homeworld Deserts of Karak's pushed as taking a far more character-centric role than the prior titles, and I'd say the voices reflect that in some ways. They aren't great. For example, some characters, the captain in particular, delivers lines with the emotional resonance of Keanu Reeves' monologues translated through a speaking spell running out of batteries. Now, that being said, the main character and the side voices spoke by random units on the battlefield are excellent and add to the atmosphere immensely. Luckily, you hear them more than the others, and their random chatter can really make the world feel busy and unique, far more so than at first glance. As a package, though, I'd say the good balances out the bad. You're looking at average. Gameplay. So, you take on the role of Rachel, the lead science officer, as your clan heads out into the desert to find the Gerisi object. By doing so, you're put into the position of leading your repair vehicle out with others and salvaging debris for energy and resources, while fighting off the Galcian and furthering the story. Here's where the first problem shows up. Rachel's positioning and the way it fits in the world seems completely shoehorned in. Her vehicle is basically a slightly upgraded version of another that's in the game, and it feels like there's this double lead style of gameplay that has you controlling everything in the game, but you're not the commander. You're even controlling the commander. Now, I get that not being the commander can add some impact into the game, but at times it just feels really odd. It'd be like some dude in a patrol boat telling the admiral in the Navy to get with it and get his boats moving for backup. And that's just one of the first times where I felt that maybe some of this prior game, before this was Homeworld, sort of crept in. And of course, to me, that would make sense. If not, well, then it just doesn't make sense at all. Now, that being said, you quickly gather resources and build and upgrade your forces while fighting off the Galcian and trying to stay battle ready. And there are a good number of really cool forces to build, from mobile missile launchers to anti-aircraft tanks to bombers that drop sweet sky death onto enemies from above. Absolutely love those units. But none of it feels new. In fact, despite this unique genealogy that they keep talking about, much of Homeworld Deserts is smack dab in the middle. It's really mired in safe designs and uninspired forces, meaning that for the most part it's tank versus hovercraft almost the entire game, unless you hack them anonymous style and take over one of their vehicles for a time. However, I admit putting down turrets and watching them absolutely juice incoming enemies. These things alert everyone to their presence by sending all but the strongest and most able enemy into a warm, fiery dirt nap. It's actually a little bit laughable how cool they are, and the vehicle that can drop them always became my very first build every single time I entered a level. Now, in all honesty though, the gameplay of Homeworld Deserts of Kharak is really bog standard. You gather resources at locations and fight off enemies, who, as you can expect, usually have a fairly unlimited number of resources compared to you. And that's explained in the story, and most likely that's because they want to stop you from throwing your keyboard through the monitor after the 40th carrier attack on your people, despite you owning everything on the map in regards to resources. The game does try to shake things up a bit though, with line of sight and elevated territory, but by shake things up I sort of mean do what other RTSs have already done. In fact, even when I hear people talking about these new features, I begin to wonder if they've ever played an RTS in years. It's my personal belief that the mystery about RTSs is the fact that many gamers don't know just how far they've elevated in the past couple years. Everything here, or almost everything, has been done elsewhere. To me, really, an RTS is about the holy trinity of balance, position, resources, and timing. For much of Homeworld Deserts, it gets it right, and some levels in their setups are highly interesting with a nice push-pull to the battles, and occasionally some good strategies needed to win. However, there are a lot of oddities here as well. The salvage, for example, it can get really lean at times, meaning you'll run out of resources. But that's no problem, right? Because you'll just retire a vehicle of yours and scrap it, as you can with some of them. Some of them. Because some vehicles can't be destroyed, which is just completely odd, especially because those are the ones that make the most sense to retire, like the salvagers themselves or airplanes. Instead, you can be left with a number of useless vehicles just running around you. If you couldn't salvage any vehicle, that would make sense. But there's no rhyme or reason why you can't do that with the very vehicles that it makes the most sense to do them with. This results in some battles not only taking far longer than they should because you're pretty much out of everything, but unduly penalizing you due to bad design and no explanation on why some vehicles can or can't be retired. It almost makes you feel like you want to build one just so you can see if you can destroy the goddamn thing. Now, terrain in the game does allow for creating choke points, as it has different levels and you can break line of fire using different special abilities, and using the land to stop attacks from specific locations does happen. But then again, it does in World of Conflict as well, and that's from 2007. As another gamer said while we were playing, this is an RTS that feels a little out of its time. Now, multiplayer is going to take longer for me to review, as I could never get on, which is probably due to only a couple of us having review copies. So, fun factor. You know, it was fun at times, I guess, but ultimately it felt more like a mod than a full prequel, and it certainly felt like many of the original game's plans stayed in the title, and I don't mean the original Homeworlds, but I mean when it was called Shipbreakers, because even during the actual game's cutscene, somebody talks about Shipbreakers, almost like they left it in. I'm not sure if that's true, but even without knowing that, the odd command structure as well as the hilariously odd restrictions for gameplay, such as salvaging just certain vehicles and not others, felt boring most of the time, and certainly not up to par with other RTS titles that we have coming out and ones that have just come out. So anyway, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or in this case, deep sale, and never touch it rating scale. This is wait for a sale. There's really nothing in this game that's bad. However, there's very little that makes it feel like it's as polished, presentable, or perfect as the Homeworld titles. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you liked the review. If you did, hit thumbs up. If you didn't, hit thumbs down, and peace out.